Hi there, this is Stephanie Sims with Financeability, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our Entrepreneurs Community series entitled Pooling Your Knowledge. Today I'm lucky to have with me Judy Otten, who's going to tell us a little bit about what she does with her company GrowthCast, and our subject for today is setting your business up for financial success. So thank you to everybody who's already watching. I appreciate all the support. And for any of you who have questions, either that are just starting out your business, or if you're a veteran but you've still got questions about finance, Judy and I would love to hear from you, so feel free to leave those questions in the comments and we will get to as many of them as we can during the show. And of course, if we can't get to them all, we'll come back and answer them after the show. So first I want you guys to meet Judy.
Hi all, I'm Judy Otten. I'm the founder of GrowthCast, and we are a software application that helps businesses with financial forecasting. It was built out of my own need. My last firm was a technology consulting firm, and we were growing and looking for new office space and trying to figure out what we could afford. And neither myself nor my business partners had a really good answer. So being the geeky Excel girl that I am, I went home over the weekend and I built the predecessor to GrowthCast in an Excel spreadsheet that just over the years that we used it grew really monstrous. We used it all the time. It was hugely helpful, but a little more than Excel could take. So for my next adventure, I decided to build it in software, in internet-based software, in a really easy-to-use fashion. Because one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of the similar tools out there were very, very complicated and way more than the average business owner needed or could digest or frankly would spend the time doing. So we're building something really easy, really quick for all business owners to get some insight into their business like they maybe haven't ever had in the past.
Yeah, that sounds...
Stephanie.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I really, I have seen your product and I really think it's got great potential because, as anyone who knows me knows, I want business owners to stop being afraid of finance. And I think part of the reason people are afraid of finance is because they don't have the tools, right? They have all these complicated tools that are either hard to use or they feel like only their accountant can understand. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today when we're talking about setting yourself up for financial success in your business is that I've got some bad news. You are going to have to learn about finance. I'm sorry, you cannot escape it. It's not going to be possible to ignore finance for the entire time that you own your business. But there is good news. There are people like Judy, hopefully people like myself, plenty of other smart people out there who understand that you need someone who doesn't speak Klingon when they explain finance to you. And so you need to figure out, kind of reconcile yourself to the idea that you're going to have to learn about finance, but then go out and find people who talk about finance in a way that makes sense to you so that you can really understand what it means. It's not something to be afraid of. You're capable of understanding it. You're a smart person. I'm sure you are. If you're persistent enough to want to start your own business, you've got everything it takes to learn about finance. You just need to kind of get past the fear and find somebody who speaks a language of finance that makes sense to you. So I don't know, Judy, what do you think are some other places that that people starting out run into trouble with finance?
You know, I think one of the things that they don't do is they don't set up separate financial accounts, especially at the beginning when you're not making money, you're just spending money. I think it's really easy to just spend out of your checkbook and spend out of your savings account, but that's really going to get you in trouble. As soon as you can, set up a separate checking account, a credit card, and set up some very, very simple accounting software. Wave is free, very easy to use, very quick to get started. So that's something that I think right out of the gate that you really need to do. Another thing, and I've seen this, I'm in a co-working space with lots of entrepreneurs in all stages and lots of people with great ideas. Put together at least a rudimentary financial model. Think about how many customers you're going to need to break even and or make a paycheck? And is that, what's your market size? Is that realistic? Do you need, 50% of the market to make a profit? You might not have a great business there. Even if it's something very basic, and don't go crazy with it, because honestly, you're not going to get it right. You're just not. You're going to find out things along the way, but at least you have to have some sort of straw man just to see if there's something viable there.
Yeah, I think it's really funny because I was laughing as you were talking about that. That's another thing I see tons of businesses do, is they don't want to do a budget. And it's,
Yeah.
It reminds me of ostracism. Like, if you stick your head in the sand, the problem's still going to be there. So, you can ignore it, but it might mean, for example, if your business is trying to grow and you don't have a budget, it might mean that you're spending money on the wrong thing because you're not getting good information about how close you're getting to your target. So when we were preparing for the show, we were both talking about what we'd noted. One of the things that I wrote down was, I wrote down that you need to break the rules, for example, like Phil Boyer encourages us to do, and don't call it finance then. If finance just scares the pants off you, call it something else. Call it, I wouldn't call it accounting, but I'd call it maybe, the numbers, or I'd call it profit, or I'd call it something that makes sense to you, that lets you actually dive in and understand it. Because until you do that, you're not just missing out on, making sure your tax return gets done properly and all that stuff. You're missing out on a really great management tool that gives you good information. And so, if you thought you were supposed to sell 100 products this month for $5, it's important to know, if you don't hit your $5,000 target, $500 target, sorry, is it because you didn't sell 100 products, or is it because you didn't sell the products you sold for $5? Those are two really different problems in your business. But if you just say to yourself, well, I missed my target, so I give up, I don't want to know, you're going to have a hard time adjusting and really moving forward with your business.
Yeah. Hey, Rob Gordon's asking about break-even analysis, and that's a great point, and you touched on it as well. My whole team knows exactly how many customers we need to break even, exactly how many customers we need to make X, and how much we need to make Y, and we're counting as people sign up for the product. We're counting it off, and it's a fun goal that's, putting it that way, it's not necessarily about the dollars, it's about this number of customers, and it's a fun goal that we're all working towards. So the way that I did that specifically in my business is I know what I'm spending, and I know what I'm charging my customers, $19 a month, and just divided it. So when I get to this point, I'll cover my expenses. When I get to this point, we'll cover these salaries. So we know what all those are, both in dollars and in number of customers, which is actually more fun to track.
Well, and it's something, I think one of the other reasons people maybe are hesitant to budget, and Rob had a great suggestion. He says, don't call it a budget, call it a spending plan. And I agree for the expense side, that it should be a spending plan. I like that, planning your spending better. But we don't want to leave out the sales. There's a lot of good information, like we just talked about. Instead of counting dollars, let's count number of customers, or let's count average purchase per customer. That sometimes is a very important number for people who work in a business that's very price sensitive. Because, for example, if you focus only on number of customers, but then to get those number of customers, you cut your price by 50%, you're probably not getting exactly where you want it to go either. So, you always have to look at both sides of the equation. But let's call it a spending plan. I like that. So if you're trying to get your spending plan organized, part of it is understanding what you're currently spending. So you need to take that data on board, look at what you're already doing, and then you kind of have to shoot in the dark. If you're just starting out, you don't know how many people are going to buy your product the first month, but I really like Judy's idea of saying, here's what I think it's going to cost me, and how many people do I have to get to cover those costs? Because at least that way, when you're making a decision, say 6 months down the road, do I put more money into this business? Because we talked about this in the green room, Judy. Things will happen. They will not go the way you expected them to, and there will be a point in time where you will have to make a decision. Do I take some money out of savings? Do I take a mortgage out on my house? Do I use some of my retirement plans to keep this business going? You need to make that decision with the best information possible. So that means you need to understand how getting those clients are going to help you cover the expenses and how possible or reasonable that is. Because
Yeah.
like Jenny said, if to get your business profitable, you have to earn 50% of the market, which means that you're the only product in town, basically, or the only game in town, that's a lot less likely than if you only have to earn 1% of the market in order to be profitable.
Yeah,
So,
especially short term. Yeah, yeah. And even though you are guessing, do have some, some ramp up, some growth projections. Also take into consideration that you're going to lose some customers too. So you're going to have some loss, some growth, and as you go, you can see how you're tracking on that. The other point about what you made is what you were saying about having your backup finances in order. That's not a bad idea to do in advance. Just knowing that something's going to happen. You're going to need money at some point. The time to apply for a line of credit or a credit card or something like that is before you need it. And unless you have a rich aunt and she can just cover it for you, then you're good.
well, and that to me, that's one of the principal reasons that it's important. Again, when we're talking about a spending plan, it doesn't have to be a 50-line Excel spreadsheet with every single line item.
Not at all.
If it were me, I would start with, the big 4 categories. How much am I going to spend in marketing? How much am I going to spend in research and development? How much am I going to spend in production? Whether depending on what you do, whether it's a product or service. And then how much is it going to cost me to run my business, which most people call general and administrative. If you start with those 4 line items, don't go into any detail, just lump those 4 together and then see what happens over time. And as soon as you see one of the lines getting out of whack, like you're spending too much on marketing, that's when you say, okay, well, I need more detail in my marketing spending plan. Let me see what I already spent my money on and see if that was a good investment. Maybe I need to readjust my expectations. Maybe I really need to be spending that money. Or maybe you're going to find out that wasn't such a smart decision. I didn't need all those Facebook ads.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be nice to have someone talk about marketing and testing and ROI on marketing in a future Hangout. There's a lot to that.
Well, and that's great because we do have a couple of people who are marketing experts that we're hoping to be able to help us with one of the future entrepreneur community Hangouts. So that's a great point.
So we have a question here from Cheryl. Saying, so you said not to mix business and personal. So if you have nothing left in the business and bills are owed, do you just not pay them or you make a loan to the business? You definitely can make a loan to the business, or you can put in more capital. As far as the upfront planning, if possible, and if you have a partner or significant other spouse, these are good questions, good conversations to have in advance of needing it. It doesn't always happen that way, but it smooths things over a little bit if you can. You can definitely put the money into the business. You just shouldn't be paying things out of your checking account. You make the transfer to the business, whether it's a loan or whether it's capital investment from an owner's equity, and then you spend it out of the business.
Right. And the reason for people who maybe don't really understand why that is, it seems kind of silly to move money from your personal account to the business account to pay a bill. The reason is that most people, when they set up their business, is they want to protect their personal assets. So they're going to set up, for example, an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or they're going to set up a true corporation, which is sometimes called a C Corp, or a personal corporation, which is called an S Corp. So those legal entities, by creating this business entity, what you're saying is if somebody comes and sues my business, they are only allowed to take the assets in my business, right? Which means they can't take your house, they can't take your car, stuff like that. The problem is if you set up the legal entity, but then you run the business through your personal account, there have already been decisions, judicial decisions, where the judge said, well, you didn't run it as a separate business, so you don't get the protection of a separate legal entity. All of your assets are available in the case that somebody would sue you and get a judgment against you. So, and it's not to scare you. I'm not trying to say, oh my God, you have to worry about this. This happens all the time. But that's the real reason that you want to keep your personal and your business assets separate, is because it protects you. It protects your personal assets instead of making them part of the business, which is the whole reason for creating, you know, a separate entity for the business anyway. The other thing I would say is, as you start to grow, you're going to have a lot of transactions in your business, and you're probably going to have a lot of transactions in your personal life too. So keeping them in separate accounts just makes your life a lot easier, or your accountant's life a lot easier when it's time to do the books. So there's a couple of reasons there. Does that make sense, Judy?
Yeah, yeah. And Cheryl said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Cheryl. And we're very glad to see everybody. It looks like we got a ton of people here. It looks like Ken is here as well. Ken Maness, and you mentioned Rob is here. I was going to see who else is here. I may massacre your name. Julia Gouge, who I don't know.
From New Haven.
Oh.
And Joanne Libby from New Haven.
Great. Super. So oh, and Nicholas Morris is here too. Excellent. So thank you guys so much for turning up and for hanging out listening to us. If anybody's got other questions, we are happy to answer them. But there were a couple of other things I think that we wanted to talk about, maybe, Judy, with respect to getting things set up. For example, how often should people be reviewing their financial statements? You know, how often should they look at a bank account, or, you know, a profit and loss statement, stuff like that?
Yeah, good question. Good question. You know, it really depends on how much activity there is in the business. In the very, very early stages, you're pre-revenue, you're building your business. Unfortunately, the money's really just going one way, which is out. Certainly, you want to be looking at it at least once or twice a month, just to make sure you know what you're spending. Make sure that you're on track. Make sure that your money is going to last. You have enough runway. But in conjunction with the money, you also need to be looking at your plan. You know, if you're halfway through your money and you're only a quarter of the way through your product, you're going to need to have a plan B. Once your business gets going, once you're starting to have a lot of transactions, you really need to keep a closer eye, weekly, I would say. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. Look at your bank accounts, look at your credit card statement, and make sure nothing's awry. If you get an online accounting system, you can just pull that information in there and classify all the transactions into big chunks like marketing, administration, so you can track your spending. And if you do it weekly, it's 10-15 minutes. If you do it monthly and you're one of those people that's afraid of the F word, oh, you're not going to be loving life. So that's another reason to do it weekly, is that it's much, much less painful.
Yeah, and I think that, oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think that that's probably another part of the fear, is that people are like, okay, but do I have to do all the accounting myself? What happens? You know, I would say, especially if you're going with a very simplified system, you know, where all you have to do is decide, is this a marketing expense or a production expense, or, you know, a running my business, which we call general administrative expense, you can probably do it yourself, at least at the beginning. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I usually advise my clients to do, though, is if you have a separate legal entity for your business, which I highly recommend for the reasons we talked about before, you probably should consider hiring an accountant at least to do your taxes. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of ways, both through the structure that you choose and through the way that you account for certain things, that you can minimize the taxes that you pay. So you don't have to have an accountant right up front, but it's probably a good idea to start talking to someone when you start your business, so that they can help you look at the tax implications of what it is that you're deciding to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can even have someone look quarterly, you know, take a quick look at things quarterly, that's a great benefit. It won't take them long at all. It shouldn't cost you very much money at all. Once you get going, you also may want a bookkeeper, especially if this is not something that's comfortable for you, and that person will pay your bills and make sure the money's coming in. Oh, we haven't even talked about collections.
That's true.
Which is a whole nother place where you can do really well or really get yourself in trouble. Just whether you're following up on what's owed to you or not. A bookkeeper or even a VA or someone like that can help you with that. I think one of the keys to good accounts receivable is just following up on it very, very quickly. As soon as it's late, a nice email, a nice phone call, just wanted to make sure you got the bill. A week later, another nice phone call, just wondering when I can expect it. It doesn't have to be confrontational, but you need to stay on top of it, because that's where companies really get in trouble, is letting their receivables get out of hand, and all of a sudden there's no money in the bank. They made money, they just don't have it to spend. So.
Right. And that's where I think people also, when you're hesitant with finance and you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm scared about this, I don't understand. That's one of the key issues is you, through your financial statements, for example, through the profit and loss, you can see how much money you made, but that doesn't always translate to cash. Because you can sell something today, but just like when you buy something on a credit card, you don't have to pay for it for 30 days. Well, the client who bought your product today isn't going to pay you until 30 days. So you need to factor that in when you're thinking about not only are you profitable, so are you making money, but also do you have enough cash? That's, you know, the number of cases, the classic cases where, you know, somebody is actually hugely profitable, but they go bankrupt because they have no cash, is because, you know, for example,
all the time.
Yeah. And sometimes it's because they don't do a good job with their receivables, but I think sometimes it's also because they run into trouble really doing a good job estimating how much money they're going to need to grow. You know, which kind of brings us back to this having a plan. As long as you have a plan that makes sense to you, nobody's going to come in and say, oh, that's not detailed enough, or, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. You need to just own the numbers and say to yourself, I know how much money it's going to take me to get to the next point I want to get to. Maybe that's break even, you know, the point where your sales cover your expenses, or maybe it's, you know, a certain level of profit because you've been in business a while. But you need to have a good handle on how much it will cost you to get there, because until you know how much it's going to cost you, there's nobody who's going to say, yeah, sure, I'll just write you a check. I'll leave it blank. How much do you need?
Yeah. And as you pointed out earlier, there are people that can help you with that. You know, there are financial people, there are business coaches, there are lots of people that do have that numbers brain, do have that financial affinity, that, you know, look at Excel and just love it. Weird people that we are.
Yeah, we're crazy. Yeah. What can I say? Yeah. As Chris Brogan says, we are the freaks that shall inherit the earth. but it's not just us. It's not just us.
All kinds.
Well, and he said it in a very loving way, so I took it as a compliment. Thank you, Chris. Cool.
Oh, I see we have a whole group at the Grove watching. I just want to say, give a shout out to my friends at the Grove. It's a co-working space where I work that's just wonderful, so supportive, lots of entrepreneurs and nonprofits, and a great environment for an entrepreneur if you have access to one. You learn a lot. You learn a lot from your peers. So.
Yeah, well, and I think it's nice to have, you know, that support. That's kind of what we're trying to do in the entrepreneurs community too, is to give you that support in a virtual way. But if you can get it, you know, in a physical way where you're actually able to go and, you know, chat with people about what they're doing in your office space, that's even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? I think we've gotten most of the questions.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has questions, but if you do, feel free to type them in. I think to me, we kind of covered the two big points, which are you need to have a good handle on what it is that is happening in your business, both on the spending side and on the client side. But then you also really need to have a plan, and not just, you know, a plan. You don't need to be afraid that your plan's not perfect. Like Judy mentioned, you need to start with a plan knowing that you're going to refine it as you go along, but it's better to have a plan and say, it's kind of like striking out on a trip, right? Well, if you strike out on a trip and you don't even know where you're going to go, you could end up going north when what you really wanted to do was go east. And at least if you say, I want to go east, that's a direction. Later, you can say, well, now I need to go a little bit more southeast because I think I want to go to Texas, which is southeast from me. I'm in Arizona. But, yeah, it's a little different for you, Judy. I get that. But you know what I mean? If you start out with at least a general direction, you can always refine it as you go on. But if you start out and you've got no sense of direction, it's pretty sure you're going to get lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're stuck, get help. You know, if you're in the community and you want, I won't volunteer you, Stephanie, but if you want me to take a look at something, just hit me up. I'm happy to take a look at whatever you've got or answer your questions or help in any way that I can.
Right, and that goes the same for me. If you're, if you're struggling because you just can't tolerate the idea of setting up a budget, I am happy to help you in any way that I can. Again, it doesn't have to be super fancy or detailed. You just need to start. And I think that the good news is, although we love finance and we can, say this because we love it, I think the good news is you'll find, just like anything else in your business, once you get started, it's not nearly as bad as you thought it would be. And it kind of becomes part of managing your business. It doesn't become this separate thing that every month you say, "Ooh, I don't want to do that." You just integrate it into your routine. And like Judy said, if you're reviewing, your expenses and entering all your journal entries once a week, it's just part of what you do. But the benefit is you get all that information kind of sitting there in your brain, so that when something happens, you say to yourself, "Oh, I remember that. Let me go back and look because I remember a really big invoice that came in, or I remember that we sold a lot to this particular client." And since you've been involved with it, you've got that information at your fingertips, and you can really use it to make the best decision on how to grow your company and how to be successful.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect, wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being with us today, Judy. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I don't know, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing next? Are you you're still working on GrowthCast, right? You're not moving on to something new yet, are you?
Not yet, but we have more. Well, I'll give you a little background. I'll tell you what we're doing with GrowthCast. So GrowthCast launched commercially the end of March, and when you put a product out, you don't always know how your users are going to use it. And I went into this knowing that, and knowing that I'd learn new things, and boy, did I. So one of the things I expected is that I would have different industries using it slightly differently, and maybe at some point I'd need different language. Well, I have individuals using it, and it wasn't what I expected. So they may be my first industry, some slightly different language. We've made some modifications to the product that are rolling out this week to make it usable for individuals to do their personal finance. Now, that's still not my perfect target market, but made some changes so that they can use it and it'll work without any problems. And then I have another really, I would call her a power user on the product that's using it to build her team. Can I afford to hire one person or two? And has asked us to put in some sales pipeline stuff. So right now we put in all of her projects and all of her customers that she has on retainer, and she'd like to see some what-if analysis with her sales pipeline. So that's our next big release, will be that stuff for this particular client. So it's fun. I love having the clients ask questions. I love hearing what they need. I love being able to give them the tools that they need to manage their business better. So it's a ball. I'm having a ball.
Well, and see, that's great, because I think once people find a tool that they can use, like you said, it takes the weight off their shoulders, right? They're not out there struggling with this tool that doesn't really work. They're like, oh, okay, this is what I need. And the good news is most people, I would imagine most small business owners, myself, for example, if I created something and I said, here's what I think you need, and someone came to me and said, hey, could you make it do X, Y, and Z? I'd be like, sure, you bet, no problem. Let's get it to work for you too, because it creates a whole new market, right? Which is something we, haven't necessarily thought of. But if we can see if we can see a way that it'll help different people than we initially intended, I think we're all for that. So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's just we're just learning, and we're all learning. We're all learning about our markets and about what people need, and it's just as long. Oh, we have one more question. From Nicholas, do you remember Excel or do you recommend Excel or using accounting software? Oh, okay. So I would not recommend Excel for accounting. If you're just starting out, I have been a QuickBooks user my entire career. QuickBooks is very rich, very full-featured, very complicated. If you're just starting out and you want something where the price is right, meaning free, you might want to try Wave Accounting. Wave Accounting is very, very simple. So if you're doing something a little bit more sophisticated, I don't think it works for any kind of production because it doesn't really do a good job of showing cost of goods sold. But if you're a service or an online business like I am, Wave could be very effective. I also know that FreshBooks gets good reviews. I personally haven't used it, but I would not recommend Excel for your accounting. I would recommend you find something either online or software, free or cheap, to use as accounting software.
And just as a follow-up, and then I know we're a little bit over time, so we are going to let you guys go. We're being respectful, trying to be respectful of the fact that everybody is busy. When I know QuickBooks, for example, allows you to integrate a budget, which I think is a really useful feature, because then when you print a report, you're not having to go back and forth with here's what really happened and here's my budget over here, and I have to try to find a way to make them match. You can actually enter your budget information into QuickBooks. Do you know if Wave or FreshBooks let you do that?
Wave does not.
Okay.
I'm using GrowthCast for my budget, but I'm a little bit biased.
Well, there you go. Then you can use GrowthCast for your budget as well. But yeah, I think, as you're thinking, and again, it's not something that's going to be, I picked today and I never can change again.
Absolutely.
You pick the solution that works today, and then when you figure out that, hey, it's not working for me, you make a change at that point. But it's better to track something than nothing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and the nice thing about I'm not selling Wave. The selling point on Wave is that it's not QuickBooks is not cheap. I would think it's $40–50 a month. So if you're just starting out, that can be a decent chunk of change. So it's better to have this free software than nothing, or Excel, or your personal checkbook register. So Rob just asked about Mint. I think Mint is more for personal finance. Do you know much about Mint, Stephanie?
I have seen it a couple of times. I really think it's more for personal finance as well, although obviously you could use it for business finance. I'm not really sure what the reporting functionality is, though, because as a business owner, to me that's the biggest question, is how easy is it to get information in a format you can use?
Yeah.
But we can definitely check it out. I'm not sure when. I know you're busy, and so am I. But hey, if I'm looking for something to do for 15 minutes, maybe I'll cruise by Mint and check it out.
Yeah, I will. If I get a chance, I will too, and we'll post in here.
Exactly. Cool. Well, we have run a little bit long for the first show, but I really appreciate all the comments and all the questions. And I really would like to thank Judy so much for joining us today and for giving us such great information. And if anyone is looking for financial help, like we said, we're both happy to help you. Feel free to reach out to us, circle us, send us questions, whatever. You're also welcome inside of the entrepreneurs community to post any questions, not just finance questions, but if you've got questions about marketing or social media, or you've got questions about production, we've got tons of different specialties represented in the entrepreneurs community. So please, please, please don't hesitate to go over there and just post your question, and you'll be amazed at how many helpful people are going to come to your aid and say, hey, you know what, I had a situation like that, or I know somebody who knows about that, why don't you get in touch with them? So hopefully this will give you guys a great starting point for not being afraid of finance, and we look forward to joining you guys and watching next week's HOA. Again, it's going to be called Pooling Our Knowledge, but with a different series of a different set of guests and a different topic, which will be announced as soon as we know what it is. And hopefully everybody can mark on their calendars that this will be our time slot, Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, for the near future. If you've got any suggestions or particular questions that you'd like answered during these Hangouts, feel free to either post it in the entrepreneurs community or send it to me personally, and I will do my best to get those addressed in an upcoming show. Have you got any closing thoughts again, Judy?
No, this was fun. I loved all the questions. They were great questions. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thank you, Stephanie, so much for organizing this.
You bet. And just, I know nobody's going to believe me. This was actually Judy's very first Hangout ever. So I am very privileged that she chose to do it with me, and I think she handled it like a pro. So,
oh, thank you.
This is for Judy.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you guys next week. Hope that you have a very profitable week. Take care.
Bye.